Welcome to the Sleepy Scribe. Your endless internet wandering has brought you here, and hopefully you can finally sleep to today's topic. Now, before we begin, comment where you are listening from, and how late it is where you are. It is very interesting to see how far and wide people come to finally be able to fall asleep. Lastly, if you enjoy these videos, please subscribe, it would be very appreciated. Now, let us begin. In a kingdom far beyond the whispering forests where the trees seemed to breathe with ancient secrets, there lived a young prince named Ivan, whose heart was as restless as the wind that danced through the leaves. The sun painted gold upon the hills each morning, but Ivan's gaze was often fixed upon the distant horizon, where the sky melted into a tapestry of colors that promised adventure and magic. One evening, as twilight draped the land in soft shadows, a mysterious light flickered through the branches, a shimmering feather, radiant as a flame yet delicate as a butterfly's wing. It was the feather of the legendary Firebird, a creature spoken of in hushed tales, said to blaze across the night sky leaving trails of sparks like fallen stars. Ivan, entranced by its fiery glow, reached out and caught the feather, feeling warmth pulse through his fingers as if the sun itself had touched him. This single feather stirred a longing deeper than mere curiosity. It called to him like a melody only his soul could hear. Determined to glimpse the Firebird itself, Ivan set forth at dawn, his steps light but purposeful, leaving behind the comfort of castle walls for the untamed world beyond. The forest greeted him with a symphony of rustling leaves and distant bird calls, its shadows alive with the stories of old. Each night, Ivan lit a small fire and dreamed of the Firebird soaring high, its feathers trailing embers against the starlit canvas. His journey wove through enchanted groves where flowers glowed softly with their own light, and streams sang lullabies as clear as crystal. Along the way, Ivan encountered creatures both wondrous and strange, a fox with eyes like polished amber who offered cryptic guidance, and a gentle giant whose steps shook the earth but whose heart was tender as a spring blossom. Yet the path to the Firebird was not without peril. Dark forces lurked in the tangled undergrowth, jealous of the prince's quest and eager to snatch the fiery prize for themselves. Shadows twisted into sinister shapes, and whispered warnings rode the cold wind. But Ivan's courage burned brighter than any fear, fueled by the promise held within that single feather. At last, in the heart of the deepest forest, Ivan found the Firebird perched upon a tree that shimmered with golden leaves like coins scattered by the breeze. The bird's eyes gleamed with ancient wisdom and a fierce, untamed spirit, its plumage glowing with hues of ruby, amber, and molten gold. As Ivan approached, the Firebird's feathers stirred, releasing sparks that danced like fireflies around him. The prince bowed respectfully, feeling the weight of destiny settle upon his shoulders. The Firebird, in a voice like crackling flame and whispered wind, spoke of trials to come, of quests that would test Ivan's heart and mind, demanding not just bravery but sacrifice and understanding. Ivan knew his journey had only just begun, and that the Firebird's gift was both a blessing and a challenge, weaving a story of magic and transformation that would shape his fate and the fate of his kingdom. The morning after Ivan's encounter with the Firebird, the forest seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with the scent of pine and the faint crackle of lingering embers from the mystical bird's feathers. Ivan's fingers still tingled with warmth, a reminder that the Firebird's presence was more than a fleeting dream. It was a summons woven into the very fabric of his destiny. As he ventured deeper, the trees grew taller, their branches intertwining like ancient arms guarding secrets older than time. Every step carried the weight of both hope and uncertainty, the prince's heart a steady drumbeat beneath the rustling canopy. His path soon led him to a village nestled at the edge of the forest, where peasants whispered tales of a terrible curse that had fallen upon their lands. Crops withered under a sun that no longer warmed, and a shadowy beast prowled the nearby hills, snatching livestock and filling the night with eerie howls. The villagers looked to Ivan with a mixture of fear and desperation, their eyes pleading for salvation. The prince, though weary from travel, felt the stirrings of purpose awaken within him. Remembering the Firebird's words, he understood that his quest was entwined with the fate of these people. That evening, as the village gathered around flickering fires, Ivan shared the tale of his meeting with the radiant bird, its feathers glowing faintly in the firelight. The elders spoke of an ancient legend, only the Firebird's flames could break the curse, but to find the bird again, Ivan would have to journey beyond the known forest into the realm where shadows danced and time itself seemed to falter. Undeterred, Ivan set out at dawn, guided by the soft glow of the feather and the whispered prayers of the villagers. The forest around him grew denser, the path winding through twisted roots and tangled vines that seemed to reach out like eager fingers. Strange sounds echoed, distant laughter, the crackling of leaves, the hoot of an owl that seemed almost too knowing. The prince pressed on, each challenge testing his resolve. At one point, he found himself facing a riddle-spinning willow, whose branches swayed like a puppeteer's strings. To pass, Ivan had to answer a question that wove truth and illusion so tightly it made his mind whirl. With patience and wit, he untangled the puzzle, earning safe passage and a gift, a small glowing stone that pulsed with a heartbeat of its own. The stone, the willow whispered, would light the darkest paths and reveal hidden truths. Carrying this talisman, Ivan continued, feeling the forest shift as if alive, watching, waiting. Nights were long and filled with dreams where fire and shadow danced together, weaving visions of trials yet to come. Through tangled thickets and over moss-covered stones, Ivan's journey was a tapestry of danger and wonder, every moment colored by the promise of the Firebird's fiery light and the fate that awaited him beyond the veil of the ordinary world. The deeper Ivan ventured into the shadowed heart of the forest, the air thickened with a palpable magic, an ancient energy humming beneath the soil, whispering through the leaves, and curling around the very branches like tendrils of smoke from an eternal fire. His footsteps, though weary, carried a steady rhythm as if guided by the pulse of the earth itself. The glowing stone from the willow cast a soft, warm light, illuminating the path ahead with a golden hue that danced over moss and fallen leaves, revealing secrets hidden in the gloom. Suddenly, the forest opened into a clearing unlike any Ivan had ever seen. At its center stood an enormous tree, its bark shimmering with silver and gold veins that pulsed softly like the heartbeat of the world. This was the Tree of Flames, a sacred place where the veil between realms was thin, and where the Firebird was said to return once every century to renew its power. Perched upon a low-hanging branch was the Firebird itself, resplendent and radiant, its feathers glowing brighter than 1,000 embers, illuminating the clearing with fiery hues of red, orange, and gold. The bird's eyes, deep and ancient, held a flicker of both challenge and kindness. Ivan stepped forward, the glow of the stone in his hand matching the brilliance of the Firebird's plumage. The bird's voice, when it came, was like the crackle of a hearth fire on a cold night, warm and commanding. It spoke of the trials Ivan must face, trials not only of strength but of heart and wisdom. The first challenge was to retrieve the golden apple from the enchanted orchard guarded by the serpents of sorrow. The orchard lay beyond a valley where memories could twist and ensnare those who dared enter, turning hopes into fears and courage into despair. Ivan listened, the weight of the quest settling deep within him. As the Firebird spread its wings, embers drifted like falling stars, a promise and a warning intertwined. With a final, steadying breath, Ivan prepared to leave the clearing, the warmth of the Firebird's presence lingering like a comforting cloak. The path ahead was fraught with unseen dangers, but the prince's resolve burned bright, fueled by the fire within and the flickering hope of the kingdom he sought to save. With every step beyond the clearing, the forest grew stranger, trees bending toward him as if whispering secrets, shadows flickering like restless spirits. The journey through the Valley of Memories began, each moment a test of Ivan's spirit, his mind, and his heart, weaving the next chapter of his tale in the endless dance of flame and shadow. The Valley of Memories stretched before Ivan like a dream spun from both light and shadow, a place where the past wove itself into the present with threads of gold and silver, shimmering but fragile. The air was thick with echoes, whispers of laughter and sorrow, of moments long gone but never truly forgotten. As Ivan stepped into the valley, the ground beneath his feet seemed to ripple, as if he were walking upon the surface of a still, vast lake disturbed only by his passage. The earth felt soft and pliant, like a memory being shaped anew with each step, and the faint scent of moss and ancient filled his nostrils, mingling with the crisp, clean air that carried an undercurrent of something wild and untamed. Shapes flickered at the edge of his vision, fleeting glimpses of faces from his childhood, shadows of people long gone, laughter from days when the world was lighter, and tears shed in the quiet dark of night. The valley was alive with these echoes, shifting and swirling like smoke caught in a gentle breeze, inviting and unsettling all at once. The trees that lined the valley seemed to lean in, their branches whispering secrets in languages older than the kingdom itself, leaves shimmering with dew that caught the fading light like tiny mirrors reflecting forgotten dreams. Every sound was amplified, the crunch of Ivan's boots on fallen leaves, the distant call of a lone bird, the soft sigh of the wind threading through the branches, all weaving together into a haunting symphony that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the valley itself. The golden apple he sought was said to hang from a tree at the valley's heart, its fruit radiant and glowing with an inner light that could break any curse. Legends told that its skin gleamed like molten gold, and its fragrance was like a promise of renewal, sweet and sharp as a spring dawn. Yet, the serpents of sorrow, long and sinuous with scales like polished obsidian, slithered silently through the underbrush, their eyes glowing with a melancholy fire that seemed to pierce the very soul. They guarded the orchard not with ferocity alone but with the weight of grief and regret, weaving illusions that twisted memories and tested the resolve of any who dared approach. Their presence was both a warning and a lament, for these serpents were not mere beasts but the embodiment of sorrow itself, creatures born from the deepest wells of pain and loss. Ivan's mind became a battlefield where doubt and hope clashed like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Memories of failures and losses surged like a tempestuous sea, threatening to drown him in waves of despair and self-recrimination. Faces of those he could not save, voices of loved ones lost to time, the sting of past mistakes, all rose like ghosts, attempting to ensnare him in their tangled webs. Yet, like the steady flame of a candle flickering in a drafty room, a deeper courage burned within Ivan's heart, nurtured by the Firebird's blessing and the whispered encouragement of the glowing stone resting against his chest. This courage was not the absence of fear, but the quiet, unwavering resolve to face it head-on. Step by careful step, Ivan navigated the shifting illusions, learning to discern the true from the false, the heart from the shadow. He paused often, breathing deeply, grounding himself in the present even as the valley tugged at his memories. The serpent's hiss was a soft, sorrowful song that sought to bind him in chains of guilt and fear, their voices weaving spells that played upon his deepest vulnerabilities. Yet Ivan met their gaze with steady eyes, refusing to be ensnared by their mournful melody. He remembered the lessons whispered by the willow's riddle and the firebird's fiery gaze. Truth and understanding were his allies, and only by embracing them could he hope to move forward. Time seemed to stretch and fold within the valley. Moments lengthened into what felt like hours, and hours melted into dreams where fire and shadow danced together in a hypnotic swirl. Sometimes Ivan found himself retracing steps, lost in shifting landscapes where familiar paths twisted into labyrinths of doubt. Other times, a sudden breeze carried a scent, a hint of pine or the faintest trace of smoke, that reignited his determination and pointed him toward the orchard's heart. When at last he reached the ancient tree bearing the golden apples, its branches heavy with fruit that glimmered like captured sunlight, Ivan felt a swell of triumph tempered by reverence. The tree's bark was warm beneath his fingertips, pulsing faintly with life, and the air around it shimmered with a golden glow that seemed to hum with ancient magic. With a steady hand, he plucked a single apple, feeling its warmth pulse like a heartbeat in his palm. The fruit's skin was smooth and radiant, as if forged in the fires of the sun itself, and its scent filled him with a rush of hope and renewal. The serpents, watching from the shadows, acknowledged his bravery and clarity by retreating silently into the darkness, their mournful eyes lingering like a quiet farewell, a reminder that sorrow, though ever present, could be faced and overcome. Clutching the golden apple, Ivan felt a surge of power and promise flow through him, a silent vow that the curse shadowing the village could be lifted if only he could carry this light back through the valley and beyond. Yet the valley itself seemed to sigh, its shifting light weaving new challenges and mysteries ahead like threads yet to be unraveled. With the firebird's feather still warm in his pocket and the golden apple glowing softly in his hand, Ivan pressed onward, deeper into the unknown where magic and fate awaited, each step writing the next stanza of his unfolding legend in the endless dance of flame and shadow. Beyond the valley's edge, where the memories clung like morning mist to the twisted branches of ancient oaks, Ivan stepped into a realm that shimmered between reality and myth, a place where the laws of nature bent and the air itself seemed alive with whispers of forgotten magic. The ground beneath him was soft but firm, carpeted with a layer of fallen leaves that cushioned his every step and carried the scent of earth, rain, and the faintest trace of wildflowers long faded from memory. Above, the sky stretched wide and unbroken, painted in hues of deep indigo and streaked with silver ribbons of stars that twinkled like distant fires guiding the way. As Ivan moved forward, the glowing stone from the willow pulsed steadily against his side, a quiet heartbeat in the stillness, lighting the path through this enchanted land where shadows danced just beyond the flicker of its golden glow. The firebird's feather, tucked safely within his tunic, seemed to warm in response, as if alive with the same restless spirit that filled the very air around him. The trees here were unlike those of any forest he had known, towering giants whose bark shimmered with iridescent hues, leaves that whispered secrets in languages forgotten by time, and roots that curled and stretched like the fingers of ancient giants weaving through the soil. The canopy above filtered the starlight into kaleidoscopes of color, casting dancing patterns on the forest floor that seemed to move with a life of their own. Ivan felt a thrill of awe mingled with a trace of unease. This was a place where magic held sway, where the very fabric of the world felt stretched thin and alive with possibility. It was here that Ivan encountered the guardian of this realm, a great stag with antlers like branches of crystal, eyes glowing with a soft, knowing light. The stag's presence was both majestic and gentle, radiating a calm strength that seemed to steady the restless winds within Ivan's heart. The creature regarded him with a silent invitation, and Ivan understood that this guardian was a test of his worthiness, a final threshold before the ultimate meeting with the Firebird itself. As Ivan approached, the stag lowered its head in a slow, deliberate bow, a gesture of respect and trust. In that moment, the prince felt a surge of connection, not just to the creature before him, but to the entire enchanted forest, to the threads of magic that wove through every leaf, stone, and breath of wind. The stag then turned and bounded gracefully through the underbrush, its steps leaving trails of shimmering light that marked the way deeper into the heart of the realm. Ivan followed, his resolve firm and his spirit alight with anticipation. The path wound through glades where fireflies flickered like living stars, over mossy banks where tiny streams murmured secrets, and beneath arches of blooming flowers that glowed faintly in the moonlight. Along the way, Ivan's thoughts wandered to the kingdom waiting beyond the forest. The villagers, their hope resting on his success, and the curse that darkened their days like an unyielding storm cloud. His journey felt heavier now, burdened with the weight of their lives and the fragile thread of salvation he held in his hand. Yet, each step forward rekindled his courage, the glowing stone's steady pulse and the Firebird's feathers' warmth a constant reminder that he was not alone in this quest. At times, moments of lightness broke through the tension, such as when a mischievous sprite darted out from behind a tree, weaving between Ivan's legs and causing him to stumble, eliciting a rare, genuine laugh from the prince. These small bursts of joy were like bright embers in the night, keeping his spirit from darkening under the weight of destiny. Deeper still into the realm, the air grew warmer, charged with an electric hum that seemed to vibrate through Ivan's very bones. Ahead, a clearing opened, bathed in a radiant glow that pulsed with life and power, the sacred nest of the Firebird. The prince paused, heart pounding like a drumbeat that echoed through the silent forest. There, amid a nest woven from golden twigs and glowing embers, lay the Firebird itself, majestic and resplendent beyond anything Ivan had imagined. Its feathers blazed with colors that shifted like molten metal, eyes shining with ancient wisdom and fierce intensity. The bird lifted its head, meeting Ivan's gaze with a fierce but gentle fire that spoke of trials faced and victories won, of sacrifice and transformation yet to come. Ivan stepped forward, the glowing apple in his hand warming with the same vibrant light as the Firebird's plumage. The moment stretched, electric and profound, a silent promise of the final steps of his quest unfolding between them as the night held its breath. The moment Ivan stood before the radiant Firebird, the very air seemed to pulse with a sudden intensity, as if the forest itself held its breath. But before Ivan could speak or make a move, a figure emerged from the shadowed woods, a woman clad in robes that shimmered like moonlight on water, her eyes deep pools of ancient wisdom. She was Morozana, the enchantress of the frosted glades, known among whispered legends as a guardian of the delicate balance between fire and ice, warmth and chill. Morozana's arrival was like a sudden breeze that cools a fevered brow, her presence both calming and formidable. "Prince Ivan," she said, her voice a melody woven from the soft crackle of ice and the distant chime of bells, "to claim the Firebird's gift, you must first prove worthy through the trials of heart and mind." The Firebird itself lowered its blazing head, as though inviting Ivan to listen. Morozana explained the first trial, a test of courage. Ivan would have to venture to the Mirror Lake, where the waters reflected not only the body but the deepest fears and desires hidden within the soul. Only by facing and accepting these shadows could Ivan hope to move forward. With the Firebird's feather and the glowing apple safely stowed, Ivan set forth under Morozana's watchful gaze. The path to Mirror Lake twisted through groves where frost glistened like 1,000 diamonds, each leaf and twig coated in delicate ice, sparkling under the pale sunlight. The air was crisp and sharp, each breath a cloud of mist that hung briefly before fading into the stillness. As Ivan neared the lake, the trees thinned, revealing a glassy expanse of water so clear and calm it was as if the sky itself had melted into the earth. Ivan peered into the lake, and the surface rippled, revealing visions not of the world around him but of his own heart. Memories of moments when he had faltered, fears of failing those who depended on him, and desires, some noble, some selfish, washed over him like waves. The lake whispered secrets, daring him to confront the truth within. For hours, Ivan wrestled with these visions, sometimes sinking beneath the surface of his doubts, other times rising with renewed resolve. When at last he stepped back, breath steady and heart lighter, the lake shimmered in approval, and a soft glow emanated from its depths, a token of acceptance to carry on. But the trials were only beginning. Morozana appeared once more, her smile enigmatic. "The second trial will test your wisdom and compassion," she said. "You must seek the grove of whispering trees, where voices of the past and future intertwine. There, you will find the lost child, a spirit trapped between worlds, whose fate is tied to the curse upon your kingdom." Guided by Morozana's cryptic words, Ivan journeyed onward. Along the way, he met new companions: Alexander, a quick-witted hunter with eyes as sharp as a hawk's and a grin that could light the darkest woods, and Yelena, a healer whose touch soothed wounds and whose knowledge of herbs rivaled the ancient lore of the forest itself. Their companionship brought warmth and laughter amid the shadows, and together they faced dangers that tested their trust and friendship. When they reached the grove of whispering trees, the air thrummed with voices, soft murmurs of hope and despair, echoes of laughter and tears. Among the rustling leaves, a pale figure appeared, a child no older than 10, with eyes wide and frightened, caught between worlds like a leaf caught in a restless stream. Ivan and his companions sought to free the lost child, unraveling the threads of sorrow and magic that bound the spirit, their efforts weaving courage and kindness into the very air. But the shadow that cursed the land was not idle. The sorcerer's tower rose jagged and cold against the swirling mists, its dark silhouette cutting through the forest like a wound. Ivan, Alexander, Yelena, and the lost child moved silently through the twisted roots and tangled undergrowth, the air thick with the acrid scent of burnt herbs and ancient curses. Shadows curled around their feet, and the faint hum of dark magic vibrated beneath the soil, pulsing with a rhythm as relentless as the beat of Ivan's own heart. Morozov's presence was a chilling wind that whispered threats on the edge of hearing, a storm gathering in the silence before the strike. As they neared the tower's base, twisted vines writhed like serpents, and the ground seemed to pulse with a life of its own, eager to bar their passage. Alexander's keen eyes caught movement, shapes lurking just beyond sight, watching and waiting with hunger in their gleaming eyes. With a signal, Ivan steeled himself, gripping the Firebird's feather close as a talisman against the dark. Yelena stepped forward, chanting in a language older than the forest, weaving protective wards that shimmered like fragile webs of light. The air crackled as the wards met the shadowy forces summoned by Morozov, a clash of ancient powers that sent ripples through the clearing. Suddenly, the twisted shapes lunged, wraith-like creatures with clawed hands and eyes burning with cold fire. Alexander's arrows flew swift and true, each shot finding its mark, while Ivan moved with surprising grace, parrying attacks and striking with the glowing apple that seemed to pulse with the fire of the phoenix itself. Yelena's healing light wove between them, mending wounds and bolstering spirits as the battle raged beneath the looming tower. Through sweat and determination, the group pressed forward, breaking through the shadows until they stood at the twisted iron gates of Morozov's fortress. Ivan's fingers brushed the cold metal, the glowing stone in his pocket pulsing in response as if urging him onward. With a shared glance, the companions stepped inside, the heavy doors groaning shut behind them like the closing of a tomb. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of smoke and something fouler, a stench that clung to the walls like a living thing. Flickering torchlight cast long shadows that danced and twisted, while distant echoes of whispered incantations seemed to crawl along the stone. The halls stretched labyrinthine, walls adorned with ancient runes that pulsed faintly with dark magic, weaving spells of confusion and despair. Ivan's resolve sharpened. Each step was a defiance against the creeping darkness that sought to unmake him. Through twisting corridors and looming chambers, the group encountered traps and illusions designed to test their minds and hearts. A hall of mirrors reflected not their faces but their fears made manifest, visions of failure, loss, and the unraveling of hope. It was here that Ivan grasped the full weight of the Firebird's gift and curse, understanding that his strength lay not in power alone but in the light he nurtured within himself and among those who journeyed with him. Deeper still, a voice echoed, a low, mocking tone that wound through the tower like smoke. Morozov stepped from the shadows, his eyes glinting with cruel amusement. Clad in robes that seemed woven from night itself, he regarded Ivan with a mixture of disdain and curiosity, as if sizing up a puzzle he had long awaited. "So, the prince comes seeking flame in the heart of darkness," Morozov sneered, voice like cracked ice. "Do you think you can claim what is not meant for mortals? Fire burns, and power devours. What will you sacrifice when the flames consume all?" Ivan met his gaze without faltering. The warmth of the Firebird's feather a steady blaze against the chill of the sorcerer's presence. Alexander and Yelena stood ready, their trust and determination a shield woven from shared trials and unspoken bonds. The lost child clung close, a fragile light in the gathering shadows, their fate intertwined with the outcome of the battle to come. The chamber seemed to pulse, magic thickening the air as the final confrontation edged ever closer, a storm of flame and shadow poised to erupt. The chamber's air shimmered with tension, every breath heavy with the weight of unseen forces gathering like a brewing tempest. Morozov's eyes glinted coldly, tracing patterns in the air as he began weaving incantations that twisted the very fabric of reality, summoning shadows that writhed and coalesced into spectral forms. These phantoms surged forward like a tide of darkness, their wailing cries filling the room with despair's chilling song. Ivan tightened his grip on the glowing apple, its warmth spreading through his fingers like liquid sunlight, steadying his racing heart. Alexander moved with lethal precision, loosing arrows that streaked through the shadows, piercing the phantoms before they could reach them. Yelena's hands danced in intricate patterns, calling forth a radiant shield of light that shimmered around the group, pushing back the encroaching darkness with waves of pure energy. The lost child, trembling yet resolute, whispered a soft prayer taught by Yelena, their voice a fragile beacon piercing the gloom. The battle raged in a whirlwind of fire and shadow, light and despair intertwining in a deadly dance. Morozov's laughter echoed, sharp and bitter, as he unleashed a tempest of icy shards that cut through the air like shards of glass. Ivan dodged and countered, the golden apple pulsing fiercely, its light slicing through the frost like a beacon of dawn. Every strike Ivan made was met with resistance, a test of endurance as the sorcerer's magic sought to unravel not only his body but his spirit. Yet, with each challenge, Ivan's resolve deepened, the bond with his companions forging a fortress stronger than any spell. The chamber itself seemed alive, walls shifting and twisting as if breathing, the very stones resonating with the clash of wills. Suddenly, amidst the chaos, Ivan felt a surge of warmth, not from the apple or the feather, but from within, a flame kindled by trust, courage, and hope. Drawing upon this inner fire, he stepped forward, voice ringing clear as a bell through the tumult. "Your darkness cannot snuff out the light we carry. Together, we are more than power or magic. We are the flame that endures." The words, simple yet profound, seemed to ripple through the chamber, weakening Morozov's spells and dissolving the shadows that clung to the air. The sorcerer's expression flickered, a shadow of doubt crossing his features. The battle reached a crescendo, a clash of wills and elements that bent the very space between them. Flames roared to life, chasing away the cold and shadow, while light and courage intertwined in a blaze that filled the chamber with brilliant radiance. Amidst this storm, Ivan seized the moment, raising the golden apple high as it ignited with fiery brilliance, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. Morozov, caught in the brilliance, staggered back, the dark magic unraveling like smoke in the wind. The fate of the Firebird, the lost child, and the kingdom hung in the balance, the tide of battle turning with every heartbeat. The blazing light from the golden apple spread like wildfire through the chamber, its radiance pushing back the shadows that clung to every corner with desperate fingers. Morozov's dark robes fluttered wildly as if caught in a storm, his sneer twisting into a mask of disbelief and fury. The walls, once alive with twisted magic, began to crack and crumble, ancient runes fading into dust as the pure light cleansed the space. Ivan's heart pounded, each beat a drum calling forth strength from deep within, a strength born not just of magic but of the bonds forged through hardship and hope. Alexander stood firm beside him, bow drawn and ready, his eyes sharp and unwavering, while Yelena's soothing chants wove a tapestry of healing and protection that surrounded them like an unbreakable shield. The lost child, no longer trembling, held Ivan's hand tightly, their gaze steady and filled with a quiet courage that belied their fragile form. Morozov's voice rose in a final, desperate curse, the sound like shattering glass, but the light from the apple grew even brighter, swallowing the darkness like the dawn chasing away the night. With a cry that echoed through the forest beyond the tower, Ivan hurled the glowing apple toward the sorcerer, the fruit bursting into flames of pure, radiant fire as it met Morozov's shadow. The sorcerer screamed as the fire enveloped him, his form dissolving into a swirl of smoke and embers that drifted away on a sudden breeze, leaving behind only silence and the faint scent of burnt herbs. The oppressive weight that had hung over the land lifted, replaced by a gentle warmth that seeped into the earth, healing the scars of magic and despair. Ivan lowered his arms, the glowing apple's fire dimming to a soft glow as the chamber settled into calm. The Firebird stirred, its feathers shimmering like living flame, and with a powerful beat of its wings, it soared upward, casting a trail of sparks that ignited the night sky with a brilliant display of light. The lost child smiled, their spirit freed from the chains that had bound them between worlds, now glowing with newfound life and hope. Alexander let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, his grin breaking through the tension like sunlight through storm clouds, while Yelena's eyes sparkled with tears of relief and joy. Outside, the forest seemed to breathe anew, leaves shimmering with dew that sparkled like diamonds in the dawn. The curse that had shadowed the kingdom began to fade, its grip loosening with every passing moment, promising a future born from the ashes of hardship and the fire of courage. Ivan looked toward the horizon, the first light of morning painting the sky in hues of gold and rose. The journey far from over, but the path forward now lit with the promise of renewal and the unyielding flame of hope. The light of dawn spilled over the kingdom like a gentle tide, washing away the shadows that had clung to every corner for so long. Ivan, Alexander, Yelena, and the lost child stepped out from the ruined tower, their faces illuminated by the soft golden glow of morning, the air fresh and filled with the scent of blooming wildflowers and damp earth. The forest around them seemed to hum with life, leaves rustling in a breeze that whispered promises of renewal and growth. Birds sang songs that danced on the wind, a chorus celebrating the fragile beauty of a world reborn from the ashes of darkness. The Firebird soared overhead, its fiery feathers trailing streaks of light that painted the sky in hues of orange and crimson, a living beacon of hope for the kingdom below. Ivan felt the weight of the glowing apple now resting warm in his palm, a symbol not only of victory but of the trials endured and the bonds forged along the way. The lost child, once a fragile spirit trapped between worlds, now walked with a confidence that seemed to ripple through the very air, their laughter light and free like the tinkling of crystal bells. As the group made their way back through the forest, the paths seemed less twisted, the shadows less oppressive, as if the land itself recognized the healing that had begun. Alexander's keen eyes caught the flicker of movement ahead, where villagers had gathered, their faces etched with cautious hope and wonder. Yelena's gentle touch soothed weary bodies and hearts, her knowledge of herbs and healing blossoming into renewed strength among the people. Ivan's thoughts turned to the kingdom's future, a future built not only on magic and courage but on the resilience of those who had endured the darkest nights. The once cursed lands began to stir with life, fields sprouted green shoots, rivers sparkled with clear water, and the air was filled with the hum of bees and the chirping of crickets. In the villages, children played in the streets, their laughter ringing out like bells, a sound that had been absent for far too long. The elders spoke in hushed tones of the prince who had braved shadows and fire, a tale that would be woven into the fabric of their history for generations to come. Yet, amidst the joy and renewal, Ivan knew the journey was far from complete. The scars left by darkness would take time to heal, and new challenges would surely arise like storms on the horizon. But for now, the kingdom basked in the soft glow of dawn, the promise of a brighter tomorrow cradled gently in the hands of those who dared to hope. The Firebird's song echoed faintly on the breeze, a lullaby of flame and freedom that carried the story onward, as the prince and his companions stepped forward into the unfolding light of a new day. The soft morning light filtered through the trees as Ivan and his companions continued their journey back to the heart of the kingdom, each step stirring the fresh earth beneath their feet and carrying with it the promise of healing and renewal. The air was alive with the gentle hum of life reborn, buds unfurling like delicate flames of green, streams bubbling clear and bright, and the songs of birds weaving a tapestry of sound that seemed to cleanse the lingering shadows from their souls. Alexander moved with the easy grace of a seasoned hunter, his eyes sharp and alert for any signs of lingering danger, yet there was a lightness to his step now, as if the burdens of the past trials had been lifted like a heavy cloak. Yelena, her hands still fragrant with the herbs of the forest, hummed softly, her voice carrying a soothing melody that seemed to encourage the growth around them, as though her very presence was a balm to the wounded land. The lost child skipped ahead with newfound joy, chasing after fluttering butterflies and marveling at the vibrant colors that painted the world anew. Ivan felt a steady warmth radiating from the glowing apple nestled in his palm, its gentle pulse a reminder of the strength that came not just from magic but from the unbreakable bonds of friendship and hope. As they approached the village, The sounds of life grew stronger, a chorus of voices, laughter, and the rhythmic hammering of tools as villagers began the work of rebuilding homes and hearts alike. Faces turned toward them with wide eyes, a mixture of disbelief and awe, as whispers of the prince who had conquered darkness spread like wildfire. Children pressed forward, eager to touch the Firebird's feather peeking from Ivan's cloak, their eyes shining with wonder and dreams yet to be born. Elders nodded in quiet respect, their weathered hands clasped in gratitude for the light restored to their world. Among the villagers, stories began to weave themselves into the fabric of everyday life, tales of bravery, sacrifice, and the fiery spirit that refused to be extinguished. Market stalls reopened, their colors vibrant against the backdrop of freshly painted houses and blooming gardens. The scent of baking bread and simmering stew filled the air, mingling with the crispness of morning dew and the faint trace of the Firebird smoke on the breeze. Ivan took a moment to stand atop a gentle hill overlooking the village, the glowing apple warm in his hand and the Firebird's feather catching the sunlight like a flicker of flame. The path ahead was uncertain, shadows still lurking beyond the edges of their newfound peace, but the promise of tomorrow burned bright within him. Together with Alexander, Yelena, and the lost child, Ivan descended toward the village, stepping forward not as a solitary hero but as part of a living, breathing tapestry of hope and renewal. Threads intertwined by trials faced, hearts joined by courage, and a future waiting to be shaped by those who dared to dream. The village welcomed Ivan and his companions with open arms, a vibrant mosaic of life slowly knitting itself back together from the frayed edges of despair. Children darted through narrow lanes, their laughter weaving through the air like silver ribbons, chasing after cats with tails puffed like miniature thunderclouds, while elders gathered in circles beneath ancient oaks, sharing tales of days before darkness had settled like a thick fog over the land. Stalls brimming with fresh bread, ripe berries, and wild herbs burst with color, their scents mingling in the morning air to create a tapestry of comfort and hope. The villagers' hands, roughened by toil and care, now worked side by side, rebuilding homes and mending fences with a newfound purpose. Each nail hammered and stone laid a quiet act of defiance against the shadows that had threatened to consume them. Ivan, his cloak still carrying the faint scent of the enchanted forest, moved among them with a humble smile, the glowing apple nestled safely in his palm like a secret flame. Alexander's sharp eyes scanned the bustling scene, always alert but also softened by the warmth of reunion, while Yelena's gentle touch and knowledge of healing plants spread relief like a balm to weary bodies and restless minds. The lost child, once a fragile spirit tethered between worlds, now ran freely among the villagers, their laughter a bright spark igniting the hearts of those who had almost forgotten how to hope. Yet amidst the bustle and rebirth, Ivan's thoughts often wandered to the deeper wounds unseen, the fears lingering in quiet corners, the doubts that still flickered beneath smiles, and the long road ahead toward true healing. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with strokes of amber and rose, Ivan found himself drawn to the village square where a gathering was taking place. An elderly storyteller, his face etched with lines carved by years and wisdom, spun tales of ancient heroes and distant lands, his voice a warm embrace against the cooling evening. Children and adults alike leaned in, their eyes wide with wonder as the old man's words painted vivid pictures of dragons and firebirds, of princes who faced darkness and emerged stronger. Inspired by the stories, Ivan stepped forward, sharing his own tale, not just of battles fought and curses broken, but of friendship forged in fire, courage born from fear, and the enduring power of hope. His voice carried across the square, weaving a new thread into the village's growing tapestry of resilience. As twilight deepened, lanterns flickered to life, casting a gentle glow that danced on the faces turned toward the storyteller's circle. Songs rose, laughter bubbled, and for a moment, the village felt timeless, a place where past and future entwined, and the promise of dawn lingered just beyond the horizon. And so the days unfolded, each one a step forward on the path of renewal, the land and its people healing like a great tree regrowing after a fierce storm, roots deepening, branches reaching ever upward toward the light. Seasons began to shift as the kingdom embraced the slow, steady breath of renewal, the air thick with the scents of fresh earth and blooming wildflowers that carpeted the fields like a living quilt. Ivan walked among his people with the quiet strength of one who carries both the memory of hardship and the spark of a brighter future, his footsteps stirring the soft soil where new crops took root. Alexander's laughter rang out like the crack of a bowstring during the village's lively festivals, where songs and stories wove through the warm night air, tethering the past to the present in joyous celebration. Yelena's hands, ever gentle and sure, tended to both the land and the spirits of those who had been touched by darkness, her herbs blooming in vibrant gardens that spilled fragrance into the breeze like liquid sunshine. The lost child, now a symbol of hope and resilience, darted through the village with boundless energy, their laughter mingling with the song of the wind and the hum of bees dancing from blossom to blossom. Yet beneath this tapestry of life, whispers of distant troubles stirred, news of unrest beyond the borders, shadows creeping in new forms, and old fears that refused to be forgotten. Ivan's gaze often turned toward the horizon, where the forests met the mountains and the sky stretched wide and endless like a promise waiting to be claimed. There, beyond the familiar paths, lay challenges yet unseen, tests that would demand all the strength, wisdom, and heart he had gathered on his journey. One evening, beneath a sky strewn with stars that glittered like scattered gems, a messenger arrived bearing tidings from a neighboring realm, a land gripped by a creeping darkness that threatened to spill over and choke the fragile peace they had fought so hard to reclaim. The messenger spoke of strange beasts that prowled the forests, of crops failing and waters turning bitter, and of people who whispered prayers to forgotten gods in desperation. Ivan listened, the fire of determination igniting anew within him. He knew that his quest was far from over, that the light kindled in his heart must now reach beyond his own kingdom to kindle hope in others. With his loyal companions by his side, Ivan prepared to embark once more into the unknown, their bonds forged in fire and shadow a shield against the coming storm. The Firebird's feathers glowed softly, a beacon to guide them through darkness and doubt, while the golden apple's steady warmth pulsed with the promise of renewal and strength. Together, they stepped forward beneath the vast expanse of the night sky, ready to face whatever trials awaited with courage born from the journey already walked. The night air was thick with anticipation as Ivan, Alexander, Yelena, and the lost child prepared to leave the village behind, their hearts heavy with the weight of both farewell and duty. Lanterns flickered softly along the winding path as villagers gathered to bid them safe passage, their faces a mixture of hope and worry, shadows playing across the worn lines etched by seasons of hardship. The Firebird perched on Ivan's shoulder, its feathers glowing faintly in the moonlight like embers waiting to burst into flame. The golden apple nestled securely in his satchel pulsed with a gentle warmth, a reminder of the trials conquered and the power yet to be harnessed. As they stepped beyond the familiar woods, the landscape shifted beneath their feet. The trees grew taller and denser, their branches intertwining like fingers weaving a dark tapestry against the starry sky. Strange sounds echoed through the underbrush, the snap of twigs, the whisper of leaves, and the distant howl of creatures unseen. Alexander's keen eyes scanned the shadows, bow at the ready, while Yelena murmured soft prayers, calling upon the spirits of the earth and air to protect their journey. The lost child held tightly to Ivan's hand, their small fingers a steadying anchor amidst the growing uncertainty. Days stretched into weeks as they ventured deeper into the unknown, each step a dance with danger and discovery. They encountered villages cloaked in silence, fields choked with weeds, and rivers that ran thin and bitter, signs of the darkness seeping into the land like ink spreading across parchment. Yet amidst the decay, flickers of life endured, wildflowers blooming defiantly through cracks in the stone, birds singing melodies that threaded hope into the heavy air, and the quiet resilience of those who refused to yield. Along the way, new allies emerged: Ilara, a fierce warrior with eyes like molten gold and a blade that sang with every strike, and Thomas, a scholar whose knowledge of ancient lore and forgotten magic provided a lantern in the shadowed forests. The forest grew darker and thicker as Ivan and his companions pressed onward, the trees looming like silent sentinels guarding secrets older than memory. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, a reminder that life and death danced in an endless cycle beneath the canopy. Ilara moved with the grace of a predator, her eyes sharp and unblinking, while Thomas trailed behind, clutching ancient scrolls and murmuring incantations to ward off the creeping shadows. The lost child's laughter, once bright and free, now rang more cautiously through the stillness, their small hand never leaving Ivan's. Nightfall brought its own terrors, the eerie howl of wolves that seemed to vanish before they could be seen, and the flicker of eyes watching from the darkness like embers glowing in a dying fire. One evening, as the moon hung low and swollen, the group stumbled upon a clearing bathed in silver light. At its center stood a stone altar, carved with runes that pulsed faintly with forgotten magic. Thomas approached cautiously, fingers tracing the weathered symbols as a story unfolded, a tale of a forgotten pact between mortal and spirit, a promise broken and a curse unleashed. The air thickened as whispers rose from the earth, swirling around them like a chill wind carrying voices from beyond. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and from the shadows emerged a creature woven from mist and sorrow, its eyes deep pools reflecting endless grief. Ilara raised her sword, the blade singing a sharp note that cut through the silence, while Ivan stepped forward, the Firebird's feather glowing bright against the gloom. The creature spoke in a voice like the rustle of dead leaves, revealing its tragic tale of betrayal and loss, bound to the land by pain and vengeance. Rather than drawing steel, Ivan offered words of compassion and understanding, weaving a tale of forgiveness and hope that shimmered in the cold night air like a fragile flame. Slowly, the creature's form softened, the mist dissipating as the ancient sorrow lifted, leaving behind a blessing that shimmered like morning dew. With renewed spirits, the group pressed onward, the trials of shadow and light weaving them closer together, their journey a testament to the enduring strength found in unity, courage, and the gentle power of kindness even in the darkest of times. As dawn stretched its golden fingers over the treetops, the companions emerged from the veil of the haunted grove, their faces pale but eyes gleaming with the strange clarity that follows a night of terror overcome. The sky had the soft blue hue of brushed silk, dotted with the faintest remnants of stars, and the air felt fresher, as if the forest itself had exhaled after centuries of tension. Ivan walked with a steady rhythm now, his boots caked in mud and memory, his tunic bearing signs of wear, but his back unbent. The Firebird's feather, ever nestled at his side, shimmered more brightly with each passing day, pulsing like a heart tuned to something ancient and powerful that waited just beyond the horizon. They came to a river not found on any map, its waters so clear they mirrored the sky in perfect detail, as if the heavens had melted and flowed through the earth. Thomas leaned over the bank, peering into the current with the narrowed eyes of a scholar. "This isn't water," he said after a long pause. "This is memory." And indeed, when Ivan crouched beside him and peered in, he saw not his own reflection, but moments from his past, his mother's hand guiding him as a boy, the day his father set a crown of leaves upon his head and called him brave. Ilara, ever suspicious of magic that showed more than it gave, stayed a step back. The lost child, however, tiptoed to the edge and laughed as scenes of their forgotten family danced beneath the surface like fireflies under glass. The river spoke, not in words but in rhythm, pulling at the senses. To cross it, Thomas explained, each traveler had to offer a memory in return. Ivan closed his eyes, reaching into himself like one digging through an old chest, and let go of a memory of a sunny morning in the palace orchard, where the peaches grew fat and golden, and the breeze smelled like laughter. The river rippled, accepted the gift, and a silver path began to shimmer across its surface. Ilara offered something more complex, a jewel beneath a winter moon, her first taste of blood and fear and triumph tangled into one sharp moment. The path widened. Thomas gave up an afternoon under an oak tree with his first master, whose laugh was like thunder wrapped in honey. And the lost child, with eyes unusually solemn, let slip a moment of music, a lullaby, perhaps, sung by a voice that no longer had a name. When they stepped onto the path, it held firm beneath their feet, cold as polished glass and as thin as trust. The river whispered beneath them, a soft susurrus of lives once lived, and the air carried a weightless kind of sadness. Halfway across, the wind changed, and from upstream came a boat without oars or sail, gliding toward them silently. It bore a single passenger, a woman in robes of mist, her eyes milky white and her hands resting on the edge of the boat like sleeping birds. She said nothing as she passed, but each of them felt her gaze pass through their chests like candlelight through glass. Thomas shuddered and muttered something about the watcher of forgotten things. Ivan looked back once she vanished into the fog, but the path behind them had already dissolved. On the far shore, the land had changed. What had once been thick forest was now rolling hills dotted with odd stones, some shaped like sleeping faces, others like keys, others still like grasping hands half buried in moss. "Charming," Ilara remarked, nudging one of the stones with her boot only to jump back as it grumbled something in a deep, gravelly voice. The hills, it turned out, were alive in a fashion. They were the resting grounds of the Whisperers, ancient beings who had once sung the first songs of the world. Disturbing them meant inviting riddles, and riddles in this land were dangerous sport. One such stone began humming a question, and Thomas, never one to resist intellectual bait, answered back. The result was a sudden drop of earth beneath his feet, and he vanished with a startled squawk. Ivan lunged, caught his cloak, and hauled him back to safety, both of them tumbling into a heap of leaves and curses. "Let's not do that again," Ivan panted. The hills seemed to chuckle. Beyond them lay a copse of trees wound together by silver vines, and at its heart stood a gate woven from thorns and sorrow. A sentinel awaited them there, not with blade or challenge, but with a harp carved from bone and strung with hair finer than silk. She strummed once and spoke a single word, truth. The gate would open only to the truth spoken aloud, and not just any truth, but the one buried deepest in their hearts. Ivan stepped forward, his voice catching on the edge of admission, then steadying. "I fear I'm not worthy of the journey I'm on," he said, and the gate quivered. Ilara followed, her voice dry but raw. "I don't believe in heroes, but I'm starting to believe in this one." The gate trembled. Thomas, adjusting his crushed hat, muttered, "I think I might be more afraid of succeeding than failing." The gate creaked, and the lost child whispered, "I miss the name I don't remember." The gate opened, not with a groan but with a sigh, as though relieved it could finally release its burden. Beyond it, the world shimmered anew, and somewhere, far away but drawing closer, a firebird sang again. Beyond the sighing gate, the silver vines slowly unwound like old memories loosening their grip on the mind, and the trees, previously bound tightly like braids, now stood apart, revealing a path of soft moss lit by pale floating lights. The lights bobbed as if breathing, exhaling the faint scent of lavender and something older, something like the dust of forgotten dreams. Ivan stepped forward first, his boots sinking slightly into the moss that gave underfoot like a cradle. The firebird's feather at his side pulsed with greater warmth, as though it too felt the nearness of something long awaited. The others followed close behind, though not without unease. The mossy path curved gently like a sleeping snake, leading into a vale surrounded by twisted oaks whose trunks bore faces, not carved, but grown, twisted expressions frozen in bark. One tree wept sap through hollow eyes, while another grinned too wide, teeth of lichen and fungus smiling into the stillness. "I don't like this place," Ilara murmured, hand on her dagger. "It's like a bad joke someone whispered too many times." Thomas nodded solemnly, though his eyes flickered with interest. "These are the trees of regret. They grow where too many choices curdle in the air. Some say they sprouted from the thoughts left behind by the dead." "Oh, delightful," Ivan muttered, pressing forward. The veil opened slowly, and at its center stood something unexpected, a village. Tiny houses with roofs of moss and walls made of cobbled bark, doors barely up to Ivan's chest, chimneys emitting curls of smoke scented with cinnamon and pine. But it was the residents that gave them pause, little folk, no taller than a rabbit, with oversized heads and eyes that blinked sideways like frogs. They wore acorn caps for helmets and tunics stitched from squirrel fur and moth wings, and they carried tiny spears fashioned from porcupine quills. At first, they scattered like startled mice. Then one brave soul emerged, holding aloft a thimble like a war banner, and squeaked, "State your business or prepare to be thoroughly annoyed." Ivan blinked. "We mean no harm. We're just passing through." The little warrior narrowed his eyes. "Passing through? Nobody just passes through the veil of murmur. Either you're lost or cursed. Or perhaps both." Thomas knelt. "We've crossed a river of memory, met a woman in mist, and answered riddles that nearly swallowed us whole. If that doesn't count as cursed, I don't know what does." At that, the little folk relaxed somewhat and even offered tea, served in hollowed nutshells with milk stolen from beetles and honey borrowed from bees with questionable consent. Their leader introduced himself as Thistlecap, chief guardian of the border of wistfulness. He had a laugh like a hiccup and an uncanny ability to make anyone feel like they'd forgotten something important. "We've been watching the skies," he said, puffing on a pipe that emitted lavender instead of smoke. "The Firebird's been restless. That usually means change is coming. Or a bad harvest. Or both. We're seeking the Firebird," Ivan said. "And perhaps something more. There's a darkness ahead. We can feel it." Thistlecap nodded solemnly. "Aye, the shadow veil. No one passes there unscathed. But before you go, you'll need something most travelers forget." "A map?" Ilara asked. "A sword?" Thomas suggested. "Clean socks," ventured the lost child. "Perspective," Thistlecap replied with a wink. And then he called forth the village's greatest secret, a theater troupe. Before Ivan could object, a stage unfolded from a hollow log, complete with curtains made from butterfly wings and lights fashioned from fireflies who grumbled about the hours but did their job nonetheless. The play began, an exaggerated pantomime of the hero's journey thus far, with tiny puppets resembling Ivan and the others being chased by ridiculous monsters and narrowly avoiding doom with absurd luck. Ivan's puppet tripped over its own sword every few steps. Ilara's puppet refused to speak and instead stabbed everything, including a tree and a breakfast plate. Thomas's puppet wore glasses 3 times too big and burst into tears at dramatic intervals. The lost child's puppet simply floated offstage at random and returned with a pastry. The audience of tiny folk roared with laughter, and even Ivan cracked a smile. For all its silliness, the play mirrored something real, how they had become not just companions, but a kind of odd family, stitched together by shared peril and stubborn hearts. Thistlecap bowed at the end. Now you've seen yourselves as others see you, which is always less glamorous and much more hilarious. Can we go to the scary place now? Ilara asked, though she didn't hide her smirk. Thistlecap nodded. To the edge of the Shadow Vale, then. But beware. That place feeds on fear like a hungry dog at supper. As they left the village, the little folk tossed dried petals and soft berries at their feet, a farewell both ceremonial and slightly sticky. The path turned again, winding through a region where the sun seemed reluctant to shine. The trees grew taller, thinner, leaning together like gossiping old women sharing secrets no one dared to repeat. Their bark had turned grey, almost silver, and the wind began to carry strange echoes, voices not their own, whispers without breath. The Shadow Vale loomed ahead. Here, even the Firebird's feather dimmed slightly, as if muffled by the heavy air. The ground felt soft but not welcoming, more like a sponge soaked in secrets. Shapes flickered between the trees, some tall and regal, others crawling, some familiar enough to ache in the heart. Thomas muttered, "This is where the past tries to rewrite itself. Don't listen. Don't follow." The first trial came in the form of a fork in the path. Not one of earth, but of illusion. Each traveler saw a different road ahead. Ivan saw his father's voice calling from a hall of light. Ilara saw her old commander, arms crossed, asking if she'd finally become the traitor she feared. Thomas saw a library burning, the flames spelling out equations he'd never finished. The lost child heard their name, not the one they had now, but the one forgotten, called from a distant echo like a song hummed too quietly. But it was the Firebird's feather that saved them. It pulsed a low heat, enough to draw their hands toward it, and when they looked again, the path was singular, straight, and silent. They walked faster now, as if chased by the selves they left behind. Shadows flitted in the corners of their vision, some sad, others angry, none willing to leave without a final stare. And just ahead, past the last tree shaped like a weeping woman, something vast waited. A clearing. A heartbeat. A figure wrapped in black. The next trial had arrived, and it wore the face of someone Ivan once trusted. Under the last arching bough of the Shadow Vale, where light filtered through leaves as thin as whispers and the earth no longer smelled of moss but of cold stone and old breath, the figure waited. It stood still as if carved from night itself, its silhouette bearing the edges of someone once loved, a brother, a mentor, a friend perhaps, but twisted just enough to feel wrong, like a lullaby sung off-key. Ivan stepped forward, and the figure mirrored him, each movement precise, as though a reflection on the surface of black water had stepped into the world and forgotten it wasn't real. The others held back, instinct pressing on their chests like a warning drum. Ilara gripped her dagger, Thomas muttered half-formed spells under his breath, and the lost child took one step behind a tree, peeking out with wide, unblinking eyes. "You've come far," the figure said, voice smooth like polished bone. "But you carry more than the Firebird's feather. You carry doubt, and guilt, and promises broken before they were ever made." Ivan's jaw tensed, fingers twitching at his side. "We all carry things. Doesn't mean we stop walking." "No," it said, "but it means you arrive weaker. And I will test that weakness." It stepped aside, revealing behind it a circle of standing stones, black as pitch and veined with glowing red like the cracks in a weary heart. In the center of that circle stood a cage of thorns, and within it, curled like a comet in slumber, was the Firebird. Even dimmed and unmoving, it shimmered with golds and crimsons, feathers shifting in unseen breezes, eyes closed but lids flickering with dreams. "Free it," said the shadow, "and you take its burden. Let it lie, and you walk away unchanged. But the world burns either way." Ilara stepped forward now, shoulders squared like cliffs bracing against a storm. We didn't come this far to leave the Firebird behind. We didn't cross rivers of memory and eat beetle milk tea with thimble warriors to back out now. Thomas nodded, pulling a scroll from his pack, hands steady though his eyes gleamed with unease. Let's do this together. One mind, one heart, one foolhardy mission. The lost child giggled, skipping into the circle and touching one of the stones. It hummed under their palm, and the thorns hissed. The cage was alive. Careful. Thomas snapped, but the child only grinned. It likes me. Ivan approached the cage, the Firebird's feather in his hand glowing warmer, brighter, like a candle remembering how to become a bonfire. As he raised the feather, the thorns reared back, snarling in dry rustles, and the figure of Shadow stepped into the ring. You are not enough, it said simply, and with that, split into four. One faced each traveler, wearing their face, mouthing their fears. Ivan saw a version of himself bowed by a crown too heavy, alone on a throne of ash. Ilara's double accused her with every wound she'd ever left behind. Thomas's counterpart mocked his knowledge, twisting facts into fears. The lost child's Shadow simply wept, repeating their name like a broken music box. But this time, none of them stood alone. Ivan turned to his fear and laughed, the sound scraping but real. I've made mistakes. I'll make more. But I'm still walking. Ilara stepped forward, blade flashing. You think you scare me? I am my fear. I sharpened it myself. Thomas whispered a word that was less spell and more apology, and his shadow faded like a nightmare at sunrise. The lost child walked to their mirror, placed a hand on its cheek, and said, "You can go now." And it did. The cage cracked. The thorns shriveled. The Firebird opened its eyes. And oh, how it glowed. Like dawn breaking in a forgotten world. Like a song remembered in silence. Like laughter echoing after a long winter. It rose, vast wings unfolding, scattering embers that did not burn but bloomed into light. The figure of Shadow hissed, tried to melt away, but the Firebird's light pinned it still. Ivan stepped toward it and, for once, felt no hate. You're a part of me, he said softly. But not the part that wins. With that, the Shadow dissolved, not in pain, but in peace. As if it, too, had grown tired of haunting. The Firebird spoke not in words, but in warmth, a voice felt beneath the skin, around the bones, deep in the belly where truth likes to sleep. It offered each of them a gift. To Ilara, a memory returned, her sister's voice, lost in war, now a song humming in her bones. To Thomas, clarity, the question he'd never solved finally completing itself like a puzzle clicking into place. To the lost child, a name, not forced upon them, but one they chose, Rue. And to Ivan, the choice. The Firebird bowed before him. He could take its flame, its power, and rise as a guardian of fire and fate. Or he could release it, let it fly free, and trust that his journey had already lit a spark strong enough to guide others. Ivan looked at his friends. At Ilara wiping her eyes without admitting she was crying. At Thomas humming equations under his breath. At Rue skipping among the ashes like a child chasing stars. And he smiled. Fly, he said. We'll be all right. The Firebird soared, trailing fire that seeded flowers, laughter, and life in its wake. The forest changed behind it, grey melting to green, twisted trees straightening like spines long bent. And Ivan, Ilara, Thomas, and Rue walked home, though not the same home they had left. This one had different walls, higher skies, and new paths that branched toward places they had yet to dream of. But that's the funny thing about stories, they don't end when the book closes. They nestle in your heart, warm as feathers, soft as fire, waiting to be told again. And somewhere, deep in the trees, a thimble warrior raised a toast, fireflies blinked in applause, and the trees whispered, not in sorrow, but in song. The wind smelled like thunder long before the storm came. Ivan, Ilara, Thomas, and the lost child crested the final ridge just as the clouds rolled in, dark and swollen, dragging dusk across the sky like a heavy curtain. Below them lay the ruins of an old keep, older than even the kingdom's oldest songs, where ivy strangled stone and the walls leaned as if whispering secrets to the earth. But deep within, nestled in the heart of time's ruin, pulsed the glow of golden feathers. Thomas muttered incantations beneath his breath, his fingers tracing runes through the air like a spider spinning silk. Ilara unslung her bow, her gaze sharp and her stance coiled like a spring, ever watchful, for every place of great magic had its guardian, and they never liked visitors. Ivan stepped forward, feeling the weight of every step, memories sacrificed, battles fought, kindness offered, and the strange, burning pull of destiny that had kept his feet moving through every trial. As he reached the threshold, the wind stopped. The rain paused. The air held its breath. And the last guardian emerged. It was not a dragon, nor a knight in cursed armor, nor a chimera stitched from nightmares. It was a woman. Not old, not young, her age shifted with every blink, and her eyes were galaxies turned inward. She did not speak, but Ivan understood. She was the final test. Not of strength, or wit, but of will. "Will you trade your life for hers?" she asked, not with sound but with thought that pressed into the marrow. "Will you return to your kingdom, crownless and forgotten, if it means she flies free?" Ivan turned to his companions. Ilara nodded once, tight-lipped. Thomas tilted his head as if hearing distant music. The lost child clutched Ivan's hand like it was a rope in a storm. "Yes," Ivan said. "Even if my name is lost, she must fly." The woman blinked once. The wind resumed. The storm broke, and in a blaze that turned the clouds gold, the Firebird burst free. Her wings were flame and starlight, her cry both joy and sorrow spun together, and in that moment, the ruins bloomed. Flowers sprang from cracks, moss glowed like emeralds, and the air sang with color. Ivan fell to one knee, not in defeat, but reverence. The Firebird, now free, landed before him. Her gaze held centuries, but her touch was a whisper. She lowered her head, and from her crown of burning feathers, one drifted down into Ivan's palm. "I do not grant wishes," she said, her voice like sunrise over still water, "but I return gifts." Light burst around them. When it faded, they stood not in ruins, but in a garden. The Firebird was gone, but her warmth lingered. Thomas found his master's old staff waiting at his feet. Ilara discovered her sister's name carved into the stone wall, proof she had not been forgotten. And the lost child, with wide eyes and trembling fingers, remembered a lullaby. Ivan, now featherless, looked to the sky. There was no throne awaiting him, no parades or crowns. But in his heart, something steadier had taken root, a peace that hummed like the earth after rain. He turned to his companions. "Shall we go home?" he asked. And together, they began the long walk toward dawn.